Good morning. It's good afternoon already. I just have one question for Bishop Hankerson and Bishop Matthews, and that is, when are you going to teach these people how to worship? When? Come on. Well, brothers and sisters, I want to take you back to September 29th, 2006, Ramadi, Iraq. Petty Officer Michael Mansour, if we can bring the screen up, is a United States Navy SEAL. He's standing on a roof in Ramadi, Iraq. He's got two other SEALs flanking him. They've taken AK-47 fire and an RPG, and they're waiting for the next attack. Mansour is standing in front of a doorway to that roof that he's standing on. Insurgents have blocked off the streets, and somebody is in the mosque at the corner over the loudspeaker saying, "Kill the Americans." So as they're waiting for the attack, from an unknown location, a grenade comes up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. He's got a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself. But if he does, his two Navy SEAL colleagues who are in the prone position next to him are surely going to die. What would you do? So Mansour yells, "Grenade!" And then he jumps chest first onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, he dies. His two Navy SEAL colleagues are injured, but they're alive. One of the survivors at Mansour's funeral said, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008 when President George W. Bush called Mansour's parents into the East Room of the White House, and they gave his parents Mansour's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president read the citation with tears streaming down his face. Michael Mansour literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. Question is, would anybody sacrifice himself to save you? Somebody already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. Unfortunately, a lot of people today don't believe the story's true. They think it's fairy tales. They think it's made up. Bishop Matthews was telling me there are people saying, "Oh, they made up the Bible really late, and it was made up. It's a white man's religion, and it's not for everybody." Come on. There's only one race, the human race. We're all one in Christ. In fact, I think it's really easy to show that not only did Jesus rise from the dead, but that he jumped on a grenade for you and me. And you only need to answer 4 questions. 4 questions. If you investigate these 4 questions, you're going to see that Christianity's true, and you can share this with other people. People are going to come up to you and say, "Oh, no, it's not true, and here's why." You're going to be able to go through these 4 questions and show them why it's true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Oh, we need sound for this back there. Hang on. We need sound. Here are the 4 questions. We really need sound. This is good. This is good sound, man. Come on. Maybe you guys are just going to have to play again. All right? You got sound? Here we go. Here's some sound. There you go. that is some pretty grooving music, isn't it? Not like this. This is better. But that's actually from our TV show. We got a TV show on DirecTV, channel 378. If you don't have DirecTV, it's on Roku. Anyone here have Roku? Okay, if you don't have Roku, it's on this new technology sweeping the internet, or sweeping the United States. It's called the internet. It's on our website right there, CrossExamined.org. You can watch the show streaming live. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We're also on radio every Saturday mornings on stations all over the country. If there's not a station near you, you can listen to it online, and it's also on iTunes. It's on our app. I'll tell you about that later. Let's talk about why these are the 4 questions. Does truth exist? Does God exist? Are miracles possible? And is the New Testament true? First question, does truth exist? Obviously, if there's no truth, you always hear people say there's no truth, right? Or all truth is relative, or you got your truth, I got my truth. If there is no truth, then quite obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, then atheism can't be true either, right? So we're going to deal with that question first. Second question, does God exist? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if God doesn't exist. Well, there's a lot of evidence that God does exist. This morning, I'm just going to show you one piece of evidence that God does exist. What do I mean by God? A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things, and whose every attribute is infinite. We're going to look at one argument today briefly. Are miracles possible? Obviously, the Bible can't be true if miracles are not possible. Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you today that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and atheists are even admitting the evidence for this miracle. Then we can get to the key question. We're going to spend most of our time on question 4. Is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we can see if the greatest miracle in the New Testament, which was the resurrection, if the resurrection really did occur. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Right? If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then game over, it ain't true. We're going to see it's true. Now, this is what we call apologetics. We're not saying we're sorry. It's we're giving evidence for what we believe. And this is actually commanded in the Bible. For example, Peter said, always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks, to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Now, the gentleness and respect thing is hard for me because I'm originally from New Jersey. All right? Forget about it. But we're supposed to give evidence. And apparently, this material people like. I've got a really good recommendation here for you.
We have been so blessed. Dr. Frank Turek blessed our church here in Tembisa, South Africa. He talked to the hearts and the minds of people here, and it has blessed us. Answered so many questions. People have left enthused and said that apologetics is not just an academic thing, but it's alive. Thank you, Dr. Frank Turek.
That's the man right there, ladies and gentlemen. Bishop Matthews. Now, some of you know, but some of you don't, that Bishop Matthews and his wife Sharon right here, the track star, right here, they literally moved from Detroit with their 10 kids and went to one of the poorest areas in Africa, Tembisa, and started a church. And I was blessed enough to go preach there 3 summers ago, 2015, August 2015. And that's how we met, and it was one of the highlights of my life, tell you the truth, to go there, because those people, the ministry that you guys had there and still have there is such a blessing. In fact, here we all are. This is the picture of us after the service, and they just had a metal building with a cement floor, and their Sunday school classes, what we would call sheds. And they were doing it. I tell you, they were so respected in the city, in the town there, that I said, you got any problem with people stealing stuff? He said, one day I parked my car outside the wall, and somebody was trying to break in. You remember telling me this? And a whole bunch of guys from the neighborhood said, hey, that's the pastor's car. You can't do that. They ended that right away. All right, so we're going to go through these 4 questions really quickly. You guys ready to go? All right, let's start at does truth exist? Does truth exist? Now, whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? That's right, because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And Nicholson said, hey, that was pretty weak. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. Can we try that again? Colonel, I want the truth. There you go, there you go. That's right. Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth. There is no truth. All truth is relative. Well, look, if you don't get anything else out of what we talk about here, if you get this one idea down, it's going to be worth your time. And here's what you do. If somebody ever comes up to you and say there is no truth, you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Who said it? Yeah, you simply say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough, but it's self-defeating. It's like, say, I can't speak a word in English. If I were to say that, you'd say, what? You just used English to say it. How about if somebody says, all truth is relative? What are you going to say? Is that a relative truth? No, that's an absolute truth. How about if somebody says you can't know anything? What are you going to say? Then how do you know that? How do you know that you can't know? How about if somebody says there are no absolutes? What are you going to say? Yeah, are you absolutely sure? Is that an absolute? How about if somebody, here's the big one, you're going to get this, you're going to get this. How about if somebody says you ought not judge? Yeah, then why are you judging me for judging? See, that's a judgment. Now, by the way, did Jesus say don't make judgments? No, he said judge not, lest you be judged by the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. So is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. In other words, this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. You got that problem, go fix it, and then go help your brother. But it would be ridiculous to say don't make judgments because it's a judgment itself. You notice that? By the way, I will say this, that Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees, right? And the Pharisees were pretty judgmental, and Jesus went after them. And he wasn't so nice doing it, was he? If you think Jesus was a sweet guy who never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read either John chapter 8 or Matthew chapter 23. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, right? In John chapter 8, and he says, your father is the devil. Can you imagine saying that to somebody? You're talking to somebody and they're out of line and you go, your father is the devil. What? Jesus, that's not very Christ-like to you. I am Christ. What are you talking about? How about in Matthew 23, he goes, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, you brood of vipers, you whitewashed tombs. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside, you're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all just get along, boys and girls? No! I mean, he was nice most of the time, but he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter E. No, Jesus was tough. It's okay to be tough. In fact, we were singing before, we're going to fall in love with Jesus. I don't know about you guys up here, but it's kind of hard for me to think about falling in love with a man, you know what I mean? Or I'm falling in love with Jesus. It's okay to be tough. You know what you mean by you love Jesus. But Jesus was a man's man. And what we've done in our culture, we made him a sissy. He's not. Jesus was tough. By the way, there is truth out there, and you can know it, but a lot of people don't want to know it. In fact, here's the question I ask everybody, particularly on a college campus, because Bishop Matthews mentioned I go to a lot of college campuses, and during the Q&A, we'll have a microphone set up, and they get up to the microphone, and if they demonstrate any hostility at all, I'll ask them this question. I'll say, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And some of them will stand at the microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no. No? I asked you if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And you say no? How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. The problem isn't here, the problem's here. They don't want it to be true. Why don't they not want it to be true? Because they don't want there to be a God, because they want to be God. They want to be God of their own lives. And God is going to get in the way. You see, most people are not on a truth quest. We're on a happiness quest. Right? And we're going to believe whatever we think is going to make us happy. Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. You can make yourself happy temporarily over the short term, doing a lot of stupid, sinful things. But over the long term, it's a disaster. And you ask anybody in here over 40 about it, and they'll go, yep, yeah, I tried that. That didn't work. Right? The only way to get true contentment and happiness is to go straight through truth, and Jesus is the truth. Now, let me ask you one more thing before we go to the next section. I want everybody in here who's a Christian, I assume we all are, I want everyone in here to think about somebody you know who's not a Christian. A friend, a relative. Everybody got somebody? Everybody got somebody? Here's my question I want to ask you about the person you're thinking of. Is the person you're thinking of on a relentless pursuit of truth? They want to know if Christianity is true. Or are they apathetic or even hostile to Christianity? How many people say the person I'm thinking of is on a relentless pursuit of truth? They want to know. Crickets. How many people say the person I'm thinking of is apathetic or hostile? Yeah, look around the room. It's the same everywhere. That's why when you meet somebody who's giving you a hard time, just ask them, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And then be quiet and see what they say. Because they probably don't want it to be true. They want to do their own thing. All right, so truth exists. Next question, does God exist? Now, there's a lot of different arguments for God. But one argument for God is that the universe actually... Are you guys awake yet? The universe actually exploded into being out of nothing. So once there was nothing, and then the entire, what we call universe, the space-time continuum, came into existence, and even atheists are admitting this. Even the late Stephen Hawking, a famous physicist, said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, some of you going, you know, Frank, we're Christians in here. We don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good, even the atheists are admitting it. Now, they try and come up with another explanation other than God, but they fail. But think about this, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. If space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing, then whatever created space, matter, and time can't be made of space, matter, and time, right? In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because in order to create you got to make a choice, and only persons make choices. Also intelligent, because to make a choice you got to have a mind, right? Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God, that's right. Well, you say, how do you know it's the Christian God? We don't yet. But if we keep going down the questions, we're going to realize that the spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent being that created the universe was Jesus in his divine nature. Now, he added a human nature to come to earth. You guys know that. But his divine nature created the universe. Now, there's other arguments for God, like the design argument for God and the moral argument. You know, nothing can be morally right or wrong unless God exists, because God's the standard of good. If there is no standard of good outside ourselves, then there's no way to say anything's right or wrong. And we all know certain things are right and wrong, don't we? So God exists. But we got to move on. We got to go to the next question. Are miracles possible? And a lot of people don't believe that miracles are possible. They say, for example, Noah. How can you believe in Noah and the ark? Ain't that crazy? Yeah, I think it sounds crazy. It does sound crazy, doesn't it? I actually think it happened, though. In fact, in 2006, I went on a Noah's Ark expedition to Iran. It's a long story, but a friend of mine who's the real Indiana Jones, Bob Cornuke, we went to Iran. We flew to Tehran. We went 55 miles northwest into the Elburz Mountains, where we had some intel an old boat could have been. We got up to 13,125 feet. I had my sat watch on. And we saw this object sticking out of the side of a mountain. It looked like it could have been the remains of an old boat. In fact, it had planking on it. But when we got up to the object, we touched it, and it was rock. We took samples back to the United States, and 5 out of the 9 samples tested as petrified wood. But we can't prove it's Noah's Ark because it didn't say USS Noah on the side. I mean, how could you? It seemed like a rock formation to me. I don't know why we got petrified wood, but who knows? But it does seem crazy, right? Noah and the ark. How about a resurrection? Do you know anybody who's risen from the dead? Now, neither do I. So why would you believe in a resurrected Jesus? And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? I mean, what's the deal with Jonah? Can you really believe in Jonah? I mean, please. Come on. Now, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? What is it? No, resurrection's easy compared to the greatest miracle. Greatest miracle in the Bible, what is it? You just jumped for it a minute ago. Yeah, the greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? I mean, if God can create the whole universe out of nothing, can he raise Jesus from the dead? Can he walk on water? Can he part the Red Sea? Can he do the Noah miracle? How about the Jonah miracle? Yeah, that's easy for God to create the universe out of nothing. Well, here's the interesting part. We even got scientists now saying that the evidence for the beginning of the universe is real. Well, if the first verse is true, these other verses are true as well. At least they could be, right? Now, let me say one other thing about miracles. You hear this all the time. You know, I can't believe in miracles because I've never seen one. For one thing you can say to that is, look around, you're living in one. This universe is a miracle, right? Secondly, you believe in a lot of things you've never seen, right? You believe in your mind. Have you ever seen it? No, you're using it right now. You believe in the laws of logic. You ever seen those? Nope, you're using them right now. You believe in justice. Have you ever seen justice? How much carbon is in the justice molecule? You go, Frank, that's a stupid question. Why? Because justice isn't made of molecules. Yeah, I know it's not, but it's still real. You don't see it. You may see it done, but you don't see it in itself. You've never seen love. You've seen it expressed, but you've never seen it because it's not a material thing. You've never seen Abraham Lincoln. But you believe he existed, right? You haven't seen Jesus physically either. But why? There's good historical evidence he exists. That's why you believe. Do you believe in a lot of things you've never seen? By the way, if miracles do occur or have occurred, you shouldn't expect to see a lot of them. Why not? Because miracles, if they're going to get our attention, have to be rare. If miracles were happening all the time, they wouldn't mean anything, right? I mean, suppose people rose from the dead every 2 weeks. What would the resurrection of Jesus mean to us? Nothing. You go to somebody, you go, Jesus rose from the dead for your sins. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle Leroy just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it can't be a regular event. It's supposed to be a rare event. It's supposed to be something that doesn't happen a lot. That's why it's a miracle. That's why it can get our attention. And if the first verse is true, maybe the other verses are true, right? All right, let's now go to the key question. Is the New Testament true? We know that truth exists. We know that God exists. We know that miracles are possible because the greatest miracles already occurred. Now we want to see if the New Testament writers are telling the truth about what happened to Jesus in the resurrection. And for that, we got 7 lines of evidence. Relax, we can't go through all of them. I'm just going to list them, all right? And they all begin with the letter E. I'm just going to mention these. We're only going to look at 2 of them, all right? First, we got early sources. In other words, most or all of the New Testament is written prior to 70 AD within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses, by most of them eyewitnesses, and even the source materials earlier than that. We got eyewitness details throughout the text. In fact, the Gospel of John has 59 historically probable or historically confirmed eyewitness details. The book of Acts, 84 details. They're all listed, and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, chapter 10. We have embarrassing stories. We'll spend more time on that in a minute. We also have excruciating deaths. I'll cover that one too. We also have elaborate testimony. I can't really explain that here because it takes too long, but that is the best evidence that you never heard about that shows you that the New Testament writers have independently witnessed the same event. They confirm it. We also have expected predictions. This deals with Old Testament prophecy. If I only had one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53. Have you guys read Isaiah chapter 53? When you read Isaiah chapter 53, you go, hey, this is about Jesus. Yeah, but when was it written? 700 years before Jesus. And we know it's before Jesus because the greatest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the great Isaiah scroll, 24 feet long, was found in Israel. And that scroll dates from about 150 BC. And it's got all of Isaiah in it, including Isaiah chapter 53. In fact, the Israelis have actually built an entire museum around this scroll. It's called the Shrine of the Book Museum. It's a big circular museum, and they got this scroll wrapped around this display right in the middle of it. Too bad some of them don't recognize the significance, right? That the Messiah is actually predicted in Isaiah chapter 53, and it fits with Jesus perfectly. There's also extra-biblical writers. These are people outside the New Testament that mention Jesus and the apostles briefly. People like Josephus and Suetonius and Tacitus, these kinds of folks you may have heard of, they mention what goes on. And when you add up what they say about Jesus and the apostles, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. In other words, they say the disciples believed Jesus died and rose from the dead, and they were willing to die for that belief. That's pretty good stuff, right? But let's just spend a few minutes on 2 of these. Embarrassing stories. Now, what are embarrassing stories, and how do they tell us that the New Testament writers are telling the truth? It goes like this. If there's something embarrassing to the author or authors in a text, it's probably true. Why do you think it would be true? Why? Because you're never going to write embarrassing stuff about yourself. You're never going to make up embarrassing stuff, right? You're only going to make yourself look good. You're not going to make yourself look bad. In fact, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good. And it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, now how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? No, you don't do that. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you won't lie to make yourself look bad. And the New Testament is filled with embarrassing stories that make the disciples and even Jesus potentially look bad. They're not making this up. You don't have to be Einstein to figure out that, duh, they wouldn't make this up. Let me just give you a few examples. The disciples depict themselves as dim-witted, right? How many times did they go, we didn't know what he was talking about. We didn't know what he meant. In fact, they don't really even get his mission until he's already ascended to heaven. And then they finally go, wow, I could have had a V8, you know? Up to that point, they don't even know what's going on. They're that dim. And then Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. You think they made this up? You think Mark, who wrote that down, at one point said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. Why is he calling me Satan? I'm the leader here. That's embarrassing. And then Peter says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? He winds up denying him 3 times. And then at the crucifixion, the disciples run away. And who are the brave ones? That's right, the women. That's right, the women are the brave ones. That's right, that's right. I'm woman, hear me roar. I didn't run away like you sissy pants men did. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? No. I mean, if I was inventing it, I'd write something down like this. Let's see, we marched right down there and overpowered that elite Roman guard. Yeah, that sounds good. Peter said, get out. Philip, roundhouse kicked him. John said, we'll be back. And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses in that culture? What's that? Yeah, their testimony was not considered on par with that of a man, right? So if you're trying to pass off this story as the truth, you'd never have the women be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. They're not making this up. It's embarrassing. And it doesn't help them convince other people that Jesus rose from the dead. Now, I actually had a lady come up to me once and she said, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I had not thought of that. Because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what happened? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? He's not going to tell you, right? Also, there's even, oh, by the way, I can't even believe this verse is in the Bible. This verse is in the Bible during the Great Commission. You guys know the Great Commission? That's why we're here. Matthew 28, where Jesus says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. By the way, notice he doesn't say make believers. Right? There's a difference between believers and disciples, right? Anyway, in that section, as he's standing there giving them the Great Commission, it says, his disciples are standing there, it says, some believed, but some doubted. Some doubted? He's standing right in front of them, and they're doubting him. Can you believe that? Who put that in there? I mean, can you imagine? They're standing there going, you see that guy over there? Yeah. That guy over there is Jesus. Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. It can't be. He's dead. No, it's him. The Romans killed him. They crucified him. They put a spear in his side. Blood and water came out. I'm telling you, Jesus is dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know? The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus. In Mark chapter 3, it says, Jesus' own family wanted to seize him and take him home because they think he's nuts. Really? You know, the scholars say the New Testament writers invented Jesus to be God. Really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there? That his own family thinks he's nuts. Jesus also is called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. You think they made that up? He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, you notice there are 2 prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline? Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Now, do you think Matthew and Luke, who recorded the genealogies, got together one day and said, you know what, I really think we should spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. Let's see, Rahab, Tamar. No! In fact, there's a lot of embarrassing people in the bloodline. Judah, from where we get the term Jew from, look him up. Not a good guy. Who else is in there? David. David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us too, huh? Bathsheba's in there. In fact, one of the writers won't even mention her name. You know when he gets to her name, you know what he says? Uriah's wife. Ooh. He's telling the truth, right? But it's a slam. You notice that? Because who is Uriah? Uriah was the husband of Bathsheba, whom David had killed so he could have Bathsheba. In fact, there are 5 women in the genealogy of the Jewish Messiah, and only one of them's a Jew. Tamar's not a Jew. Rahab's not a Jew. Ruth is not a Jew. Bathsheba's not a Jew. Who's the only Jew? Mary's the only Jew. History of the Jews, 1 Jew. You think they're making this up? They're not making this up. It's too embarrassing. They're just telling the truth. All right, we got to keep moving. There's more embarrassing stuff in the book. We got to go on to excruciating deaths. Not only did they say there was a lot of, and they admitted all this embarrassing stuff happened, but then they went and actually died for what they said they saw. This is a painting of Peter being crucified upside down. We know he was killed for his faith. We don't know if he was crucified upside down, but that's what tradition says. In fact, this is critically important right here we're about to talk about right now because, you know, Bishop Matthews, we're talking about the fact that there are people saying, you know, I don't know if I can trust the Bible. I think it was made up centuries later and all this stuff, right? Who wrote the New Testament down? Who were they? What was their religion before they became Christians? They're Jews, right? All the New Testament writers, with the exception of Luke, are all Jews. They already thought they're God's chosen people. And before Jesus shows up, they believe in animal sacrifice. Now, notice what happens after he shows up. I mean, they've been sacrificing animals to Yahweh for hundreds of years. Lambs and all sorts of animals. Suddenly, Jesus comes along and they say, we don't need to slay all these lambs anymore because these lambs are just symbols. Here's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. They dispense with their 2,000-year-old belief overnight. They start out believing in the binding law of Moses. After that, they go, Christ's life has fulfilled the binding law of Moses. You know, everything from the 10 Commandments through Deuteronomy, Jesus fulfilled. They're no longer binding on us. Now, we believe in the 10 Commandments because they're rewritten in the New Testament, but we don't believe in them because they're in the Old Testament. In other words, they're not binding on us because they're in the Old Testament. Jesus fulfilled all that. Before, they believed in strict monotheism. Afterwards, they believe in a Trinity, 3 persons in one divine essence. Before, they believed in the Sabbath. In fact, they thought they could be stoned for not obeying the Sabbath. Afterwards, they're worshiping on Sunday, and Paul even says, don't let anyone tell you have to obey any Sabbath or festival day. Why do we don't have to go to church on Saturday or observe the Sabbath? Who's the Sabbath? Jesus is the Sabbath. The Sabbath signified rest, and Jesus is our rest. So out of the 10 commandments, 9 of them are repeated in the New Testament as binding on Christians. The only one that isn't, keep holy the Sabbath, because Jesus is the Sabbath. Before they believed in a conquering Messiah, afterwards a sacrificial Messiah. Before they believed in circumcision, afterwards they believed in baptism and communion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what would cause these pious Jews who thought they were God's chosen people to abandon everything on the left side of the screen and adopt everything on the right side of the screen virtually overnight? The only thing I can think of is what psychologists call an impact event. What's an impact event? An impact event is an event that's so dramatic in your life that it can impact you so much that it can turn your perspective 180 degrees. You might not remember what you had for breakfast this morning, but you'll remember an impact event that happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago if you're old enough. That's how dramatic they are. Now, only a few of you in here are going to be able to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you can remember where you were and what you were doing November 22nd, 1963, raise your hand. Hold it up. Hold it up high. Can anybody in here remember that? Hold your hand up high. There's a few of us. Look around this room. You see these people with their hands up? These people are very old. November 22nd, 1963 is my earliest memory. I was 2 years old and 2 days. Yes, I'm 56 years old now. I know I don't look a day over 55, by the way. By the way, when I turned 50, my wife was very encouraging. She said, honey, you're going to live to be 100. I said, how do you know? She said, because you look half dead already. I said, hey, thanks a lot. Anyway, I'm 2 years old and 2 days, November 22nd, 1963. I'm standing in the living room as a toddler in our home in Wanamassett, New Jersey. My mother is sitting on an ottoman in front of a black and white TV, weeping uncontrollably. Mommy, what's the matter? What's the matter? They killed the president. They killed the president. President Kennedy assassinated that day. That's my earliest memory. In fact, I can see my mother right now when she was 26 years old sitting on that ottoman. I can see her when she was 26. She's 80 now. But I can see her in my mind when she was 26. That's my earliest memory. I don't remember anything before that. And very little after that. Where were you when the second plane hit the tower? You know where you were, Anthony? Everyone here knows where they were? I was in my home office in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had the TV on behind me. I saw that the first tower had been hit. I didn't know by what. I was talking to a pastor in north side of Charlotte, wanted me to come to his church, and we were trying to figure out what the topic would be. And I said, hey, you got the TV on? He goes, yeah. I said, something just hit the World Trade Tower. Maybe it was a Cessna. And so we're talking. My back is to the TV. And suddenly he yells into the phone, the second tower just got hit. I turned around, looked at the TV, the second tower's on fire. I said, was it a Cessna? He goes, no, it was a big plane. It was like a United plane. It flew right in there and exploded. I said, you saw that? He goes, it just happened on live TV. I said, look, let me call you back. I hung up the phone. For some reason that morning I had CNN on, and I'm not making this up. But the commentator on CNN said this. One has to think there's some sort of navigational error here. Navigational error? This is the clearest day in the history of the Big Apple. What do you think, the pilots can't see where they're going? You think Stevie Wonder's flying these planes? I mean, come on. This is terrorism. I called that pastor the next day. I said, we're going to come to your church and talk about Islam because that's what this is related to. Now, 9/11 was almost 17 years ago. But everybody in here is old enough can remember something about that day, right? You can remember where you were and what you were doing. But if I were to ask you, where were you 17 days ago? Most of you are going to go, I don't know, man. Let me look at my iPhone. What was I doing that? I don't know. Why can you remember something from 17 years ago but not 17 days ago? No impact event 17 days ago. Impact event 17 years ago. Brothers and sisters, do you think if Jesus literally walked out of that tomb on the third day, that would have been an impact event? You think they would have remembered everything he had said and everything he had did to the day they died? That's the only way I can figure out why they would have abandoned everything on the left and adopt everything on the right, virtually overnight. In fact, you can ask this question: what did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? What did these Jews have to gain by inventing Christianity? What did they get by saying Jesus had risen from the dead? Well, they got kicked out of the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks, right? Hey, we're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? Well, first we get kicked out of the synagogue, and then we get beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. Why haven't we thought of this earlier? No, I don't think so. In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. In fact, I get a lot of questions. Maybe you do. Questions that go like this: are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? Yeah, there are. I just briefly mentioned them. But you know what's kind of underneath that question? This is what's underneath the question. You know, you really can't trust the people who wrote down the Bible, because these people were religious people, right? And we know that religious people embellish things and they make things up, right? If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you realize how stupid that is. Why? What did the New Testament writers have to gain by inventing this? They got nothing temporally. They got beaten, tortured, and killed. They had every reason to say it wasn't true, not every reason to say it was true. Why would they die for a known lie? You say, wait a minute, Frank, some Muslims will die. They'll die for their faith. Doesn't that prove Islam is true? No, why not? Hey, there's a big difference between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. There's a lot of differences, actually. But the biggest difference is this: the Muslim martyrs don't have evidence that Islam is true. They just have faith. The New Testament writers, or martyrs on the other hand, verified Jesus had risen from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. You see, many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. You can't get better evidence than that unless you were there yourself. Now, what I'm about to say, we got to finish, right? We got to finish, okay? Huh? Got to finish now? We'll finish now, man. We'll finish now. Let's go. No. I'm going to ask. What I'm about to say is going to sound heretical, but it's not. Stay with me. For those of you in here that believe the Bible's inerrant, like I do, this is going to sound like heresy, but it's not. All right? Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding and we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible was never written. Why? Because Christianity is based on two facts: God exists and Jesus rose from the dead. Christianity is not based on a book, it's based on an event. If Jesus rose from the dead, Christianity is true. In fact, you could put it this way: the New Testament writers did not create the resurrection created the New Testament writers. There would be no New Testament if it wasn't for the resurrection. Right? I mean, why are Jews inventing a resurrected Jesus? They're not. So here's what you do. When you have somebody who comes up to you and says, I found an error in the Bible, you know what you should say? So? What's your point? Does that mean Jesus didn't rise from the dead because you found an error in the Bible? What? Are you kidding me? Do you notice that when the disciples went around trying to convince people Jesus had risen from the dead, they didn't try and convince them the Old Testament was true unless they were Jews? What did they try and convince them of? That Jesus rose from the dead. That's what you got to focus on. I believe in inerrancy as a conclusion. It's not a premise. I don't go around telling non-believers, here's why you ought to believe in Christianity because the Bible's inerrant. No, I go around saying you ought to believe it because it's true, because Jesus rose from the dead. Now, once you know he rose from the dead, then whatever he teaches is true, and Jesus taught the Old Testament was true, and he promised the New Testament, so on the authority of Jesus, I say the Bible's inerrant. You see? I just have a personal policy. Whenever anybody rises from the dead, I just believe whatever they say. Right? So, look, there were thousands of Christians before the New Testament was ever written. Do you realize that? There was no book of Ephesians, and Paul was a Christian. How? Because he witnessed the resurrected Christ. There was no book of Matthew until Matthew wrote it down. Why did he write it down? Because he witnessed the resurrected Christ. There was no book of John until John witnessed the resurrected Christ, and then he wrote it down. You get the idea. It's not based on a book, it's based on an event. So here's more evidence here. There are the 4 questions. So if somebody says there's no truth, you're going to say, is that true? Does God exist? The answer is yes, God does exist. The creation of the universe is one piece of evidence for it. Are miracles possible? Yeah, the greatest miracle has already occurred, the creation of the universe out of nothing. If that's true, then any other miracle is possible. And we just gave evidence that the New Testament's reliable. So if you want more, there's some books and DVDs on the book table right out there, including a 7-hour DVD set that goes all through all this material in a lot more detail. The book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, is out there as well. By the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine, all right? Mine, okay? Help me out here. That's a pretty good applause line there, huh? Now, this PowerPoint presentation I just went through, if you want the whole thing, type that into your browser, crossexamined.org/FF. Send us an email, and I'm going to send you this PowerPoint presentation for free in a PDF form, so you can share it. I'll also give you some other PowerPoint presentations. We're not going to share your email with anybody else, so check that out there. We all now teach online courses you can take from us at our website. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Like our Facebook page, CrossExamined.org, because when we show a video on campus, when we're live on campus, we'll stream that and you can see it. By the way, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've actually combined these 3 into one social media platform. We call it UTwitface. Don't forget about radio and TV, and if you don't do anything else, download the free CrossExamined app. 2 words in the App Store, CrossExamined. It's got the TV show on there, the radio show on there. It's got a quick answer section on there that will help you remember this stuff and interact with people on the fly. All right, 1 more minute and we're done. It's true. Christianity's true. The question is, so what? So what if it's true? What's the big deal? Well, in order to answer that question, we've got to answer, why did Jesus come? You know what? He told us why he came. He said, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You know what that means? That means that Jesus died for you and for me. He paid the ransom. Just like Michael Monsor died for his friends, Jesus died for you. Now, when I was in the Navy for 8 years in naval aviation. And when we were in aviation, we earned golden wings. But U.S. Navy SEALs earn a golden trident. It's literally the most difficult insignia in any military in the world to earn. If you earn a golden trident, you are a stud. Because only about 5 to 10 to maybe 15% of people who try to be SEALs actually make it. So that trident that they wear is their identity. Well, when Michael Monsoor was buried in California, just about every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up to his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their insignia, their tridents, and they slapped them into the roof of his casket. They literally took their identity and put their identity in their Savior. That's what we're supposed to do. You know, our culture is going to tell you to put your identity in your sexual orientation, right, Cammie? That's not the right place to put your identity. They're going to tell you to put your identity in your political party, or your ethnicity, or your job, or your bank account, or even your denomination. No, you put your identity in your Savior, the one that died for you. Amen. We're done. Thanks, brother. Great job.